What is your driving force?
I'm there for a mission. So I want to simulate life, molecules, speed up the rate of drug discovery and understanding of biology.
Michael Antonov, a visionary entrepreneur and computer scientist, he co-founded Oculus and transformed virtual reality as we know it. Now the CEO of Deep Origin, he's on a mission to extend human health span by accelerating drug discovery and simulating biology. Today, he reveals his work to revolutionize the future of medicine.
There's often several years where entrepreneur struggles and almost gives up, and then something fun. So even that happens. On that journey, you need to have both passion and persistence, but you also need to be always validating. Are you building something which is really needed?
Did you think that Oculus would get as big as it did?
Oculus is not a typical startup experience. Wasn't really sure how big it would get. When we saw the demo of VR, it was so compelling. It was clear people will want it.
Hi, Michael. Thank you for joining us at the HumanWare project today. I remember the first time I tried Oculus and playing the VR game with my friend. It's a zombie game. I really felt like I'm going to get eaten by the zombie. And you being one of the founders of Oculus, which is a great success. So could you tell us your startup stories of Oculus, how it all started?
Well, actually, I remember the zombie games. They were fun because it was one of those things you have fully blocked field of view. Therefore, if something comes at you, it feels really large.
Yes.
So it suddenly was one of the more impactful and scary things you could do early on.
Yeah.
Anyway, so for the zombie, okay, now I'm a little bit off track.
Yeah.
But speaking of Oculus, it actually came after another company we were building. I was in the computer gaming technology space. And my business partner, Brendan, from a previous company, learned about this young guy, Palmer Luckyer, who was collecting virtual reality headsets. And he became noticed when a famous programmer, John Carmack, he's actually the original creator of a game called Doom. Many people started 3D game playing with that game, reached out to him and asked him if he could show the headset at a show, which was E3.
Yeah.
So what happened is Palmer sent him a headset, and John hooked up to the game Doom, which actually has some creatures like zombies, and and he was going to show it to a few people. Now it turns out that few people were reporters. And so John was showing this duct tape foam core thing, which you could put on your face, look around. And it was just a private showing. And suddenly news starts coming out that the best thing people have seen at E3 that year was this handmade prototype of VR goggles. So my friend Brendan, who became a CEO of Oculus later on, reached out to Palmer and says, well, this is a good thing, let's meet. So we met actually in Long Beach and learned about it. And he convinced Palmer that, and by that point, as he was 19 and he was collecting things in his garage, he really didn't have much money. Like the kid was very passionate, and he had an offer from Sony to go work on VR. And it took a tiny bit of convincing, but ultimately we decided to start, and Brandon really supported starting to build this into a company, even before he knew Palmer that much, and even before he personally saw the headset.
So it's all come from that small showing case in the tech conference, and then you guys feel that it's a great start and to start to work on that company.
Yes.
Basically.
And then we had finally a week later actually saw the prototype, and it was very compelling because you could bring it to your face, and back then it was like this box with wires. But the compelling thing was that it had a fairly wide field of view, so you could see you in a room, and you can look around, and you could see like different things move in the right place. So it was very clear that people want to try and use this.
Yeah.
So that was pretty exciting to be able to jump in and build it.
And how old were you at that time when you first started Oculus?
I was in my early 30s. I think I was
Okay.
31, 32, something like that.
Wow, that's relatively early. And did you create another business before that?
Yes, our first company of ours was actually called Scaleform, and that's what got me into the video game business. And it was a user interface company. So we made technology. Basically, there used to be a program popular called Flash, Adobe Flash, which ran on websites.
Yeah.
So we made a GPU accelerated version of it, so you can really animate menus in the games. So if you have scoreboards, or if you wanted to have a screen in 3D and then some kind of moving pieces, we made technology that enabled that, and we licensed it to games. So that we started when I was 19 years old, actually with the same business partner. He was a CEO, I was a CTO, and we basically just programmed our brains out for the first 5, 6 years.
Wow, 19 years old. That's very, very early to starting a software company like that. Could you tell us a little bit of your childhood story? What led you to this programmer or gaming world?
Well, we immigrated from Russia when I was 14. My parents brought me. I'm very grateful to them for that. And I was just interested in computers. I think once I came into school here, we actually didn't have a computer at home, so I would sometimes stay after class, and it'd be a little bit of occasional, there'd be a game. There weren't that many games back then. And also you could program in BASIC, so I learned a little bit, and I wanted to get a computer, and once I did, I was programming my own games. And it usually was somewhat simple stuff, but I wrote in C, C++, even assembly language. So I became pretty much a hardcore nerd. I would stay till like 2 or 3 a.m. programming something in the evening. And that was my last 2 or 3 years in high school. And that's ultimately by the time I was in college, I wanted to build computer game engines and technology. And it just so happens that we ended up building user interface technology.
So your last 2 or 3 years in high school, you basically stay in your room doing programming thing. Okay, while watching American shows, normally they will go out and drinking. So what it is about programming that make you feel so interesting at that age?
Well, it's a very expressive, creative medium. You can build exactly what you want, so you can feel empowered. And also, especially when you are young and you are get this ability to create something, it's very compelling. I just felt like you can express, and you can also feel like you can make almost anything happen in a computer. So that is a very strong creative medium, and it's very logical. It's very structured. So yeah.
But do you having any social life in your high school time, or you most likely just stay indoors to stay with your computer?
I was not much social life.
And is that the same reason you're creating Oculus? Because I tried a lot of social software in the Oculus, and it feels like the same social rules is applied inside of the VR world as well. So it's basically you kind of could detach yourself from the real world and go into the VR world. So when you're creating Oculus, is that come from the excitement to being an engineer to make things happen? Or you are more thinking about the ethicals or the society point of view, what will happen after you creating VR?
I mean, you just build something cool, quite honestly. I like, so when you put together, like I did not see any kind of quality virtual reality before actually building Oculus. So when you could actually see an object in space and you can look at it and it doesn't actually exist, but it's right there, it's just really cool. So it's exciting. And then you come together, it creates a very interesting medium. So I wanted to build it because it was inspiring and it was a creative, it was something new.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a lot of thinking about the implications of it and such. It was just to be creative. And, we did want to build a successful company, but that's really secondary, I would say.
Yeah, and what is the biggest difficulties to building Oculus during your career working for Oculus?
Well, I was a technical co-founder, so I was responsible for the software stack, which and there were many difficulties. Quite frankly, we had one very big lucky break in the beginning, which was the Kickstarter,
Yeah.
because we launched it, and I wasn't really sure how well it would do, but we were able to break $1 million of sales within the first day. So it
Oh.
exploded, and people were, because we had some really industry legends in the video, and we had a very compelling proposition. But I didn't really know how it would go. So we were all like watching this, oh my God, like this is unbelievable. And it closed at $2.5 million a month later. So it was a very successful Kickstarter, and people got very excited. And whenever you have that type of good energy, it's
Yeah.
very inspiring to work on it yourself.
Yeah.
So that was a lucky break. That said, the technology really wasn't in good shape at that point. You could look around, put on a blurry headset, was like, it was blurry in the sense that it was pixelated, and you couldn't track very well in space. So for the first maybe 6 months, our goal in the company was to make like a simple experience we can go to developers. So our first users were other programmers or hackers who wanted to play, but they're not gamers because there weren't really good games on it.
Yeah.
So first we need to make it so a good scene actually looks good in VR, and so you can actually look around. So this tracking orientation was the first challenge because you want it to be very smooth and precise with your head. But then the biggest technical challenge that we had was actually a year and a half later, is that we wanted to be able to move in space. So if you have this cup, for example, and you move your head left or right, you're going to see it from different sides.
Yes.
So that's kind of your, in order to repeat that, you need something we call positional tracking. And the challenge is that if you just want to look around, you have these gyroscopes in these small MEMS sensors, which give you a fairly good reading.
Yeah.
But so you can look around somewhat precisely, but moving in space is difficult. So ultimately, we had to put in a camera which would look at you and it would track the headset, and it had these hidden LEDs which would be in space, so that it would know how much you moved in front and in the back. And it was particularly difficult because it has to be with sub-millimeter precision. Because if anything is just like 1 degree off, things will be unstable. So that was a challenge. I wasn't even sure we'd be able to get done in the time that we did, but ultimately we shipped was our Oculus DK2, which provided that type of tracking. And that was probably the most technically exciting part for me in Oculus, is when we were able to get movement and space and look and experience. That was awesome.
Yeah, but that's quite interesting because this is basically you are creating something extremely new and you don't know whether the technology is possible or not. And to make yourself able to tracking the spatials and all of those things. So what is your mindset or the teamwork that behind it to see, okay, this is a technology barrier, and what is basically the method or your mindset on make it happen, because nobody knows if it could happen, right?
Well, this is for the challenging technically stage. And to be fair, there's other challenges in Oculus.
Yes.
Like, for example, like devices are somewhat expensive for the market. So you need to have content. So there's many other business challenges. I dealt specifically with the technical challenges. And here, well, we knew we need to get it working. Like, we knew it's conceptually possible, right? You can track an object with a camera. How to do it was a lot of challenging engineering. So we tried 2 or 3 approaches. Was one where we had like these fiducial markers. So you have these special colored things that you can track. We ultimately settled on having infrared LEDs inside. And there's a particular pattern that they actually blinked to help the camera figure out the position. But that took like 6 months of iteration and trying. And in fact, There were other suggestions from other team, like Valve was working with them, which is another company. We were very friendly at the time. We became a bit more competitive after the Facebook thing happened. But at that point, they were helpful. So it was a suggestion that we use their technology, but I also really wanted to use ours because I thought it was simpler. So there was like a lot of tension and honestly many late hours and struggles. But there was a moment when it just started working.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like, okay, now it's actually, we believe it's possible. So that came, and then we were refining it for a few months, and it became magical in its own way.
Yeah, because I just come from, a entrepreneur kind of point of view, right? You are working in VR, maybe some of our audience, they are working in different career, they're facing different tech or career barrier. So when you know there has a huge task, clearly that's only one of the difficulties of Oculus at that time. But there probably have a lot of other difficulties. Yeah. And for something it's not so tangible, you don't actually know if you could solve it, but very likely you could, and you don't know how long, along with all the other things. How did you prioritize your task, and what is the teamwork behind it? Do you tell your team to say, okay, that's the thing we focus on the most, or you are working on different projects spontaneously?
Well, shipping a device like Oculus requires team with many specialties. For example, we had hardware, electronics, and manufacturing team. There's like firmware, they wrote kind of device drivers, engineered the actual headset. Yeah. So I was not too involved in it. I gave feedback and tried, but like Palmer was more closely involved in it. There's a very talented engineer, Nirav, who now started another company called Framework, who was instrumental to a lot of early work. And also another person called Jack Macaulay, who had experience building and manufacturing things in China. So actually establishing that relationship with manufacturers is challenging. So there were several teams. There was like the manufacturing, engineering, software, and then there's like some business product initiatives. So I was leading the software team, which meant I was responsible for the demos, for what is like the content which comes up, the SDK, and then actually does it work in terms of tracking and other details. And mostly I knew all the parts which were needed. So I was basically there's some solutions that come in from engineers themselves. For example, optical tracking. I was not the key person. We had a few very talented people, but I knew how to put together and what's needed. So I was able to track it and figure out here's what we are doing.
Okay.
So you kind of check in every couple days or in the evening how it's going, and then you do some of your own work, then you check in and you try and you iterate on that, and you see what is going, you provide feedback, and you just keep going.
But is there any moment you're like, okay, it's probably not happening, that we need to stop it, or you just always know you need to keep going?
I think in Oculus, we always knew we had to keep going. There were moments when you think a particular approach might not work, and that can be discouraging. So, you don't know when it's going to happen. So that's also, optical tracking was one of those things where, like, for 2 or 3 months, it wasn't entirely clear how we're going to do it and if it's going to work well.
Okay. And once it's being solved, did you guys celebrate, or do you guys say, okay, that's cool, that's being cool, and carry on? What are the moment when you solve that big problem and do something?
I think that'd be like Brandon, our CEO, would come over and see a demo, and everybody would come over and see demos, and we'd be like, talk about it, get some food or something. There wasn't really any. I think the celebrations, we also had these shows.
Yeah.
So the kind of thing which Oculus did, which many of startups didn't do, is we were very visible. So we would post prototype videos. Like we had on a Kickstarter, we had lots of blogs and videos. And then we had events which Nate and others were orchestrating. So we would release something to the public every few months.
Yeah.
So they were kind of, every release was kind of like a mini celebration in itself.
Yeah.
Not in the sense that we celebrated, but in the sense that like, oh, everybody is happy that made it out. And then usually there'd be press and there'd be people talking about it on Reddit. And that was exciting for me.
Yes. What do you think is the biggest misconception that people have on VR?
I don't know if there's misconceptions. I think VR in the beginning, people got very overly excited about it. And it was clear it was going to take a long time for it to grow. It was growing and gaining enthusiasm, but people started investing money in games and content like the second and third year when Oculus became kind of popular and then Facebook acquisition. So it was very exciting time. But it was clear there was almost no way to make money for other people in VR.
Yeah.
And the reason for it is because, okay, if a few 100,000 people bought headsets and it makes the news, then it's fun. But you can't sell a game to a few 100,000 people because it's not a big enough market. If like 5% of them buy it, that's not going to make enough money to pay for your development. So that was a misconception at that point in time. And it was clear to me VR will keep growing, becoming more significant, but it'll just take many years. Yeah. Now we're at a point where it's actually becoming a significant market, but it's 10 years later.
Yes.
So that was one area. And then there was this whole idea of a metaverse where people say, okay, we're going to live in this metaverse and such. And I think it's a little bit silly. Like, I think it is parts of it will be able to blend part of virtual things with augmented reality. They'll have VR worlds, but it's not like, I don't imagine there's going to be one entity which makes this build parallel world that everybody goes to. I mean, it might happen, but it's not a thing right now.
Yeah. And you have mentioned Facebook have acquired Oculus from, your founding team, and how much they have acquired for, and how it feel like after you make. I think it's quite a big success to, exit your company and all of that. Could you tell us about that part?
Well, I had very much mixed feelings about exiting. I didn't truly want to do it, but we did exit for a large amount of money. So that was $2 billion, was quite significant back then for a company which is under 2 years old. The great thing about it is that they invested a lot of resources into it. In fact, I feel like they've almost over-invested in VR. Like they have like 10,000 employees in it recently, I heard. So it's a bit nuts. And so that was very important for even industry because everybody now thought it's a real potential thing. It's a big bet to develop this technology for Facebook because they've seen it as a future platform.
Yes.
That and augmented reality, it's the same technology stack almost. So it was exciting, but now we were also a big part of this big company. So we had a lot to do because it was really not a ready product. So we had to work for a number of years to actually make it into something which people, more broader public will want to use. So it was sort of like exciting, fun, lots of kind of noise, demos, events to go to, just we were happening in the industry because that was kind of the wave. But then in the end of the day, you just have to like huddle up and actually do the work to actually make more of it real. Yeah. So that's what it was.
And what is your point of view on metaverse, or this word that almost like the Ready Player One have described that you basically live in the gamified world?
Yeah, I think right now there's no one metaverse. Every big game studio wants to create its own world, which is nice for its own gaming experience. They're not really connected or unified in any way. There'll probably be more of unified objects in VR, things you can take with you in the future. So some kind of system might evolve, but I don't really know how that'll work.
Okay, that's very interesting. And what are the most meaningful moments that happened in your career, either during the time you work in Oculus or later stage? If you name one or two, the meaningful moment that shape your career, it would be nice to hear.
Well, the most exciting moments probably were when things started working. As an engineer, that's most impressive. So for me, for example, uh, when positional tracking started working, that was just super awesome because it was very new. We didn't know we could do it, and it was just so visually compelling.
Yeah.
Everybody, so it was like, okay, it was like it's a functional leap in the quality. So that was very meaningful. There were a couple of other times when we shipped something. So in my prior company, we worked on vector graphics and we were making a rendering engine. And there's some particular challenging technology for sorting graphics that I worked on for many, many months, which came together and and then other 2 years of work came together into like a rendering system which we had. I was very proud of it. So when we demoed that and presented it and shipped it to customers, that was very impactful and meaningful. So those, I think, the kind of exciting moments as you work on something challenging and it finally comes together.
Okay, what about the personal life wise or the meaningful moment in personal life that you think have shaped the way you're thinking? Is there any?
I think personal life is somewhat different. So, for example, for me, personal life, meaningful things often are around psychological evolution. So, for example, one of the events I went to is organized by a person called Joe Hudson, who does essentially it's a small group of very open people who are willing to be vulnerable and work in their own state. And he organized an event called the Groundbreaker. So it's for a full week. You work through your fears, you work through your anger, you learn to love yourself, and it's a very, very open thing. It's entirely different situation from work. It does apply to work in the sense that if you're in that setting, you actually learn to love yourself and see other people and the pains they go through. And that, I think, for me, made me kinder to others, more appreciative of others, probably made me more loving. And I think if you have that experience, you can also apply it in a work setting because you can be more sensitive and appreciative of the pains others go through. So I think personal moments for me are fairly distinct. It's something like that. But there is personal care, like with our business partners. For example, my good business partner, Brandon, who I worked in with 2 companies over the years, we would go out, we would celebrate, we would do things together. Like those are nice moments. They're connected to work. So I think I wouldn't have enjoyed the Oculus experience without the co-founders. They just doing it on my own would not be fun.
Yeah.
So the fact that we're all together, we were all there late nights, and then we all could get excited that, selling, there's like the number of people who are signing up for Kickstarter is going up, or they started to work and everybody is like packing the computers to go to a show to present it. Like that type of stuff is exciting in a group.
Yeah.
So those moments do bring the joy to it. So I think you need the people together to appreciate the work. That is true, but you kind of have to have a work and a contribution and a reason to really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And that for me is around building something.
Oh, that's beautiful to get into your world a little bit today. And I'm thinking then after you exit the Oculus, normally I think when somebody being so successful and exit the company, they can fairly say, okay, I'm going to off to the cocktail and then stay in the beach, just enjoy the rest of my life. And then from my understanding is you shifting your career into longevity business and change it completely. Can you share with us what made that change, why you decided to go your second half of your life to something completely different?
Well, I don't think people who build stuff really can hang out on the beach for too long. I think it works for like maybe a month, or some people take off like maybe a year or 2, but usually it's inspiring to start doing something new. For me, like we were still when we exited, we still had many years of work in Facebook. So it really was no break for next 5 years.
Yeah.
But I was kind of once in Facebook and working, I started thinking about what is kind of truly interesting for me. What is the difference I can make? And what happened was that our team became bigger, and there were a lot of really talented people who came in for VR. And at some point, there was this moment where I realized I kind of don't need to be there. So there would be other people who will build a lot of a challenging technology. Like, for example, you can reconstruct the real world and the virtual world, track human bodies. There's a lot of these kind of real hardcore tech, which was challenging and interesting. But there were also teams of very smart people who started working on it. So for me, I was trying to figure out what is it that I want to do. And around that time, I mean, we already were a good time into the genomics revolution. So there was talk about DNA and how do people work. And I remember learning about longevity at one event I was at. And I started thinking, okay, how much do we understand the human body?
Yeah.
Like, can we actually understand aging? Can we do something about it? In terms of, is this genomic revolution which happened going to help us? Can we model human body? So I got engaged in the community of longevity researchers, went to conferences, and decided I'm going to learn and try to figure it out. And quite frankly, I think of myself as a pretty experienced engineer. I've written lots of code and understood complex things. So I figured maybe I'll have a talent for understanding biology because it's also so complicated. Of course, I really underestimated just how complex it is. There is really no bottom. So it's definitely a humbling experience to get into it. That said, I felt like being able to do something about humans, and if there was a way to affect longevity and health span of people and understand how we work, it could be the most impactful thing I could do or someone can do. So I decided to get into that space.
Yeah, I think in one interview you said aging feel like the biggest challenge facing mankind. Do you still believe that? And what is aging, that word means for you?
Well, it is the biggest challenge, I believe, technologically, and it is also probably the most impactful thing we can work on for humanity, because, you know, kind of the way I look at it, we as humans evolve, we try to get better, we learn, we try to be creative, and then there comes a point where we just fall apart, which is very sad.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any rule of physics or chemistry to say that must happen. I mean, there's entropy, but, you know, systems can be maintained. So the question is, what can we do about this? So I still think it is challenging, and it's the most challenging because we don't understand all the levels of body functions. So if you look at it at the scale, there is around 1 trillion of atoms in a cell. And within that, there's trillions of cells in a human body. So the system very complex, and there's many different types of cells, and each one of these machines. So to me, how does it all work is very much intellectually interesting.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating. Like, if you've seen those models, so I believe Drew Barry makes these awesome videos where you could see like ATP spin or DNA unwind, and that is like a microscopic world which is happening everywhere in us right now.
Yeah.
And we can't even simulate it right now. We can simulate pieces of it. We understand pieces of it, but how does it all come together? So I think next decade or two is a time in history of humanity we might actually be able to model it and actually understand how it works. And my thinking was, okay, if we could model a cell from atoms up, and we could say, and we can also reconstruct it.
What do you mean by model a cell? Could you clarify that?
When I say At some level, I'm talking about computational models.
Yeah.
There's different kinds of models. There is simulation where you actually take molecules in 3D structure and you computationally move things around. There is AI models where you can train a neural network which has some behavior. So there is different aspects of models.
Okay, I need to understand this clearly. So models the cells, you mean so you deconstruct the cells and then you put it in some kind of either computer or some kind of thing, and you're trying to understand how the cell perform and behave, and then you're trying to learn something from that model rather than they're in our body.
Yes. So if you look at the basic scientific inquiry, you use a range of instruments to look into the substance that you're looking at, the tissue, or maybe all the way to the cell, and you get some information about it. Like in microscope, you can get images. There's other techniques like DNA sequences. You'll get a sequence of what the DNA is. There's other ways to look at other molecules. And you get this representation of, okay, you have these states. So a model would be to trying to construct a computational representation of it in some way. So whatever is happening in wet life is represented computationally. And there's different ways of doing it. And depending on how you do it, you get different outcomes. And in theory, what you'd like to be able to do is represent it on many levels. So from atoms up, you have a refined model of, say, a cell, and where you introduce any new drug or any new perturbation, like you change temperature, you change nutrients, it would actually do whatever a real cell would do.
Oh, that's interesting.
So
So basically, you just take what in human's body as a data and put in a, I imagine, computer, and then rather than put the new drugs into that human, you put a new drug in that computer model. So if it works, so theoretically it should work in human organism as well, because you simulate that.
yes, I mean, that would be conceptually where we'd love to get.
Okay.
Reality is way, way more complicated. So we can model like a few molecules together. I mean, sometimes can model if a drug fits. You still have a whole challenge of having to take it through the clinical trials because we're not good enough at modeling the whole body. So therefore you have to put in real humans, or first you have to put in animals. So there's a lot of complexity to it that what I'm describing is still science fiction today. But I think we can take steps towards it. And as we take those steps, we can actually help drug discovery and we can help heal disease.
Yeah. You know, like currently the anti-aging market is an 191 billion US dollar, and they are assuming in 2030 it will achieving 421 billion dollars. And in which picture that your current company is playing in that big longevity futures?
I mean, you're probably talking about therapeutic. Like most of the market is pharma, drug development.
Yeah.
There is some part of it which could be diagnostics or other things. And we are looking specifically at tools and approaches to make new drugs possible. So that's when you have a disease or maybe some aspects of aging, could be changes in what you call pathways or some kind of proteins, the way something behaves. So maybe what happens if you can affect a protein where its state changes and some mechanisms are different, then the disease can be, either cured or managed for that time period. So that we're providing tools which help people make drugs, which will be a part of this industry.
Okay. That's very interesting. And for you personally, did you see like getting into the longevity business and all this drug discovery business? Can I say it's a drug discovery business?
Yeah, drug discovery is kind of a core part of what we help with.
Yeah. And do you think that kind of affected the way you see in life or you see in longevity in general?
Well, there's many parts to longevity.
Okay.
So if you think about it, there's different ways people approach it. So when I get into it, if I want to live healthy and long, I know what many of those things are, so I'm going to do them. So that's a part of it. But if you look at the industry of what you're trying to let's say, companies which are trying to be longevity companies, there's really, I would say, three classes of them.
Yeah.
There is therapeutic companies, which is what we are talking about. They're fundamentally trying to understand biology and solve some disease or some aspect of aging.
Yeah.
So that's therapeutics. It's very hard. It takes a decade, high risk probability of failure. But if you do it, you can really save a lot of lives. Then there is diagnostics.
Yeah.
Diagnostics, you can help disease, find what's going on so you can maybe intervene.
Yeah.
But also there's a lot of like wearables, measuring your health.
Yeah.
So like Oura Ring is a simple example. And those are the tools which help people maybe optimize their health.
Yeah.
But they don't necessarily solve it.
Yeah.
And the third one is various supplements and vitamins and whatnot. And there's definite health benefits you can get from supplements. And but a lot of marketing plays a very big role.
Yeah.
So you can win by just marketing something you don't really have as much knowledge about. So that's like longevity. So people who are doing it either doing one of those things or they're just coaching people to live healthier
Yeah.
based on all of those things. So as you get in the industry, you start learning a bit about each one and you can apply some to your health, but you decide what you want to do on your own.
Yeah.
In my case, I wanted to go into the deep end of trying to look at the core of biology.
Yeah. And why name Deep Origin? Like, is there any meaning towards that name that you chose for your company?
Well, I feel like all the behavior kind of originates from atoms in the smallest units, from the kind of depths of things. We wanted to have models for understanding from the most bottom basic blocks up.
Okay.
So that's the way we think about it.
Yeah. And, think about biology in an engineer mind. Do you think as a human, we could reprogram ourselves? Or potentially, let's say, if some part of our cell, our neurons doesn't work, we can potentially replace it with some new neurons and new cells that have been made in a dish and put it back in us and live longer. Do you think that's science fiction, or do you think that's possible in our lifetime?
I think it's possible to an extent.
Which
Like,
extent?
Well, let's put it this way. I've seen there are startups and companies and research projects which are looking at the ways of delivering neurons into the brain. It's in an infancy stages, but I suspect that in 10 years or so, some of it will be possible. And it might help regenerate. Brain is actually very hard to regenerate. Officially, I think we can do it, even though there's been arguments about whether there is stem cells in the brain or not. I think there is some, and there is some neuroplasticity, which lets you adapt to new things. So you can potentially introduce new neurons to help heal or grow some areas. But it's non-trivial. It's probably one of the harder things to do. So I expect it will take, 1 or 2 decades before that is commercially meaningful. Let's put it this way.
Yeah. And for that part, for the drug discovery part, is your company using AI for doing the drug discovery? And as an engineer again, how did you see the relationship between AI and the human programmer? And also in personal life-wise, how did you feel about AI?
Well, we're using a lot of AI. AI is a very broad term. So it came from like the old simpler neural network models, which in some sense almost approximate statistics to better deep learning models, to now there's these language models which can help you search literature. So there's very different parts and aspects of AI. So we use a lot of in our simulation and molecular modeling, we use AI to speed up some processes like molecular docking, some aspects of physics simulation. We use some parts of it to train and speed up algorithms. We also have AI language model tools such as an Balto AI assistant we launched somewhat recently, which helps people ask for a protein and help them dock and find a drug. So those are the different levels. So we apply those tools. That said, I think at the core our company is not purely AI. It's really around the whole technology stack and the physics and making it all work together.
Okay. And when you think about the future of human and technology goals, do you see a utopian world or do you see a dystopian world in general at this stage?
I don't think we all know where we're heading.
Yeah.
There is definitely a little bit of a fear right now about what do these language models and is super intelligence going to evolve, what's going to do it. I tend to be a bit more conservative and optimistic. So I think AI will make a big impact, but it might not make as a drastic change in our world as we think it might. And but we don't really know.
Yeah. In your personal life, you are very off, the media or radar. Most of the video of you is about very hardcore programming or things like that, I think, by far. So if we're taking a step into your personal life, what is your, everyday routine look like or in stay productive and stay so, great at your work?
Well, it's changed over the years. I think in my 20s, I would stay up and program till late evenings. So maybe 1 a.m. or 2 a.m., however long it would be to finish whatever I wanted to finish that time. Now I'm more of a morning person and I care about my health. So I usually wake up like 6:30, go to the gym, eat healthy, and try to go to sleep on time. That's relates to the longevity basics. Longevity basics sadly today are sleep, exercise, and good food.
Yeah.
So that's I take care of myself, and usually by 9 or 10 I can focus on work, and I most of the time I go into the office and work with a team, and sometimes I stay at home and can do more focused work.
Okay. And what you would say, is there any new technology interventions or biohacking things you have tried recently you find is very interesting?
I try a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Like I do use red light, and I think it may help the skin. Honestly, some of these things are very hard to really tell if it makes a difference or not.
Yeah.
I think have a temperature controlled bed, which is actually, I think, helps sleep. It lowers your heart rate a little bit more and general improvement. And yeah, otherwise, like certain vitamins, you can find health optimization doctors who look at really what your body needs.
Yeah.
So I do that, and I take rapamycin, which, a handful of people in longevity do. Clearly get medical advice, but also evaluate your health.
Yeah.
The most basics like sleep and exercise would come as are going to give you the most wins.
Yeah. And for the people who recently starting their business or they are thinking about creating something new, do you have any advice for the young entrepreneur or the people who are in the entrepreneur space?
I think two things come to mind. One is do something you're really passionate and enjoy doing. So that means, like, if you're building something, in that moment, can you be in flow? Can you actually be creating something you care about? And sometimes it's hard because you might have a business goal or something which is hard to achieve. So you have to balance it. Sometimes you have to do some painful things, but ideally you want to have majority of your work be in a state where you enjoy. And if maybe some of it you don't enjoy, find a partner, somebody who enjoys that other kind of work.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, is a key part to keep you enjoying and motivating it, because otherwise you can't, it's hard to become successful at something you're miserable at doing.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. The other part is looking at the customers and evaluating what is the actual problems that need to be solved. Because even when you start building something you really want, it may actually turn out that what you are building is not exactly what you can sell.
Yeah.
So you want to see, are you solving the real problems for others? So having that feedback cycle around early in your company to see that you're delivering value is important. And frankly, it's hard because sometimes if we have a passionate idea, we want to do it, and that's what I was like. And we don't really want to care if others think that's what's needed. And because you just believe it's going to be good enough and it will be needed. And there's certainly a reason to have that drive, but you want to correct it with a real market world. So I think looking into customers and their needs is a very basic business thing.
I actually want to challenge you because at first when you talk about Oculus, it seems like you're just really passionate about building the hardware, right, as an engineer. Did you see it will become such a big success when you're building it, or do you check in your customers' view at that time?
Well, Oculus is not a typical startup experience. We were lucky to be in the right place in the right time with the right team. So when we saw the demo of VR, it was so compelling that it was clear people will want it. And then we were quickly validated by the Kickstarter and other things. So that's like 0.1% of businesses who are going to be able to be that lucky. Most of the time you come company, even like now with Deep Origin, we need to figure out, are we delivering the right thing for the users? And that process may take years, at least a couple of years, right? And there's a notion of finding product market fit. So it's classical, even for many successful companies, there's often several years where entrepreneur struggles and almost gives up, and then something fun. So even that happens, right? So on that journey, you need to have both passion and persistence, but you also need to be always validating. Are you building something which is really needed? So that is, and finding that right balance, because it's actually a very challenging thing, because if you're very knowledgeable and passionate about your industry, then you might have already an idea. Like if you have A, B, C, D, people will buy. But if you are young and you maybe know about the industry and you are excited and you learn, but you don't know all the A, B, C, Ds, and you may think you need X and Y to be built. And you can go on, and if you work hard enough and keep going, you'll often succeed if you just really that hard, but it'll be much harder road, and you may still need to adjust. So that's really, that balance is something to always keep an eye on.
Oh, that is interesting. Well, I feel to start any company is not a straight line, but at which point, do you ever think to give up, ever, like for your current business or current discovering of your work, or you just feel like you just need to keep going? What is your driving force behind all that?
Well, I think they're different. So a different company, a different moment. So when I was young, I was making user interface technology. That was I just wanted to make cool tech for gaming, and I thought that what we were building was better than most other things, and I wanted to be creative. So that's a driving force of wanting to build cool things and like kind of have a goal of like having a game engine and that type of technology. For Oculus, it was really, honestly, I've joined other people's vision. Once I saw it working, it was so compelling to me, and I was in industry, I could see how it would come to life, and I got very excited. But Oculus' journey was so fast and so driven that there was no reason to really worry. Like, well, there were reasons to worry something wouldn't work. We won't ship, it'll be too expensive. But there wasn't really a doubt that it's needed.
Yeah.
Right? And that is kind of a remarkable situation. And in the current company with Deep Origin, I'm there for a different reason. I'm there for a mission. So I want to simulate life, molecules. I want to, like the mission of a company is to organize, model, and simulate biology. Speed up the rate of drug discovery and understanding of biology. So I'm there to make those quality tools, right? And within that space, there's 100 things we could do, right? So we are always thinking out of these 5 or 10 things which are good, which ones do we actually do, which ones we don't do. And then we need to validate with users. And that process of navigating that is not easy. So sometimes you think you want to do this, but then you realize you either don't have enough resources or time to do it, others are doing it better, or so you position what of it you're doing well, or do you need to double down, right? So that kind of challenge is real. So, now I have a bit more resources to keep going. So I don't have to worry about like, will we have money tomorrow? But I do have to worry, are we building the right thing? And how will we get there?
Yeah. But, I think you are very well established as an entrepreneur, and also, with all the knowledge you got, is there still any fear goes, into your career or your personal life? Do you have any fear at all in life?
I mean, there's always fear. You don't get away from fear.
And how you deal with it?
You just let it be, I guess, and then move on anyway.
And actually, I would love to understand, because I heard a lot about Silicon Valley stories, and it just sounds all very interesting and fascinating. So, what is a tech company owner's day look like in SF? Like week wise, do you work all the time? Do you have rest?
I think it depends. You tend to think about your company or project most of the time. That's tends to occupy you. But there's sometimes personal life occupies you, something else. Generally speaking, I do work on weekends, but I don't work as much on weekends. So I'll give myself space if needed. I think it's honestly, for me personally, it's a little hard to work the same hours in my 40s than I would in like my 20s. I'm hoping I can be more impactful instead. And it's very important for me personally to be in a clear mind focused state. That is, when I come in, I feel good. I can really zoom in and think holistically, clearly, with some level of comfort and joy about whatever this problem would at me. I don't personally like to be rushed. I don't. So I try to find specific focused period of time. Like I get up like these 4 hours consecutively. I'm not going to have meetings, and I will just work. So, and that way I can process things at my own pace and pick what's the most important. And then I chunk my meetings as much as possible so that they don't spread out and eat the rest of the day.
Yeah.
So those type of things, that's how I try to work.
So Michael, why did you set up Deep Origin?
I felt that we really need better tools in biology. So actually, there's a very interesting concept, which I believe in, is that tooling can really speed up progress. So I think a classic example I saw written about in one article was actually development of South Korea, and how having their own machine tooling industry sped up, being able to manufacture and really helped boost the economy very fast. And I think we need the same thing in biology. So, most of the companies which just started actually therapeutic companies, because that's what's easy to fund. Investors see, okay, if we give you money right now, you'll develop a drug, and 10, 15 years later, we have a chance on X billions of dollars. Now, so there's an incentive to build that, but there's a little bit less economic incentive to make a tool which helps you actually get there. So, and that means that on one hand, companies make a lot of little tools. Like if I'm going to make a drug, I need to figure out, well, how am I going to find a drug? And sometimes it's a particular line of wet lab research, or maybe they're doing organoids, maybe they're doing computational things. But the thing is, once you got your candidate molecule, you did your basic research, this part is almost irrelevant, right? And you start spending most of your resources late stage in the clinic and animals and validation, and the money you have to spend there is 10 to 100 times bigger. So you might have spent 5 million to 20 million on early research, and now you need 500 million, right? So the CEO and people who are putting their heads, they're going to value that last stage, which creates value of a company, and early tooling sort of gets put aside.
Yeah.
Right? And that gets repeated. So it means the industry is doing the same thing many times, but it's rarely is it shared in a unified way. And good quality comprehensive tools are hard to come by, and they're expensive, which means they're not always accessible. And this is true on scientific equipment. It's usually very expensive. It is true about some parts of software. And as I look at that, the challenge is if we said tooling can speed us up, but we're actually not investing enough in tooling, it means we're not making progress as fast as we can in health, in longevity, and all of these things. So that is why specifically I wanted to focus and build ecosystem of tools. So really the reason I started Deep Origin is I saw that there's opportunity to have a more unified, more open, more flexible, more pluginable platform, which can solve some of these hard simulation and computational biology and other biological process challenges. So yeah, that's why.
So am I alright to understand, because the world of biology and all those drug discovery is so complex, and only the people who have a lot of resource at current stage are able to do the discovering, but they are kind of fighting on their own. But your company is aiming to make the tool to make the whole drug discovery more simple and more communicative, so that even the people has a little bit less resource, they're still able to contribute into this future of the new drug discovery.
We want to move things in that direction.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, there's certainly small labs which are doing good research. There is, it's not so black and white, but on margin, we want things to be more accessible, more so they can move faster and more connected. Because we can't solve all drug discovery, but we can solve certain things in it well.
Well, is there anything in the evolution of technology make you concerned about the future of the mankind?
I think we're all a little bit curious and worried about artificial intelligence. On one hand, it feels in a hype cycle. On the other hand, there's definitely very interesting reasoning that machines are now being able to do. So I am probably not as concerned about the machines themselves, about as to what humans do with them. So I think now we have a very powerful but also potentially dangerous tool. So we have to be wise in how we use it.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Michael, for your time. I'm very happy to have you here.
Thank you. It's been a joy to talk about this. Thank you.